This month, the theme is harmony. My sermon emphasized that there is no easy path to racial harmony without the hard work to heal the wounds first. This has become a call to reclaim our highest level of humanity, our morality. What I have to say may not make some of you comfortable, but they said if there is no discomfort, there is no learning. Rodney King pleaded, "Can we get along?" after being severely beaten by a group of police in Los Angeles that caused the uprising for 6 days in 1992. The truth is, we all want to get along. However, I do not believe getting along means just being nice to each other but keep a blind eye to injustice or maintain silence when we do see it. George Floyd's death has prompted protests and call for police reform. But this is not the first time a black man was killed by the police or the protest. I'm sad to say that this will not be the last time either, based on the historic patterns in this country, as long as majority of us stay on the sideline. Eric Garner died because the police used the illegal chokehold on him. His uttering of "I can't breathe" became a rallying cry for justice since 2014. Freddie Gray was injured in a police van and died of spine and neck injury in Baltimore 2015. This year, Breonna Taylor was shot to death in her own house while the SWAT team applied no-knock policy and broke down her door in Louisville. And in amidst of the protests of George Floyd, Rashard Brooks was shot and killed from the back in Atlanta. The list goes on and on. Study predicts that unarmed blacks will be killed 5 times at the rate of unarmed whites. Reverend Sharpton pointed out in his eulogy for George Floyd, black people had white people's knees on their neck for 400 years. Do not forget this country's ugly past go way back to when white Europeans stole the land from the Indians and caused the first genocide of these native and indigenous people. The grievance is so old and painful. Running away from history and pretend everything is in the past without trying to heal the wounds will never get to what this great country has promised to be. The call to fight systemic racism is louder now. But systemic change is not some esoteric concept that politicians and leaders ought to work on. Our entire criminal justice system and economic system have failed people of color for centuries. We allowed that to happen. We own this mess, especially for Unitarian Universalists who believe in the interconnectedness of all beings. While we're busy looking at the big picture, the systemic level, I'm here to help examine how individuals like ourselves have co-created this society and what we must do to create racial harmony around us. While changing the system might feel like insurmountable task, each of us individual selves have a role to play to help the change. To take on our individual role, we must first examine our level of awareness. A group of researchers put up a mirror in front of a group of black women and asked them what they saw. They say they saw black women. When they asked a group of white women what they saw, they said they saw women. Lastly, they asked a group of white men, they said they saw themselves. This test clearly pointed out where different groups' attention is. And lack of awareness and attention is a privilege. If we don't know anything, then we can go on to claim our innocence and refuse any responsibilities. But we're not just individuals on this planet. To solve the systemic illness of our society, we must understand and own up to how our membership of specific groups has impacted our social experience. Being white, being men, being heterosexual, Christian, or upper social class gives someone the power and privilege they often haven't earned. While we have less awareness of our own group membership, we do have opinions and images of other groups. All we have to do is to close our eyes. We can name all the images we have when it comes to blacks, Latinx, Asians, Middle Easterners, Native Americans, etc. We do not have to believe these images, but we are carrying them. With our lack of awareness and our unconscious images, it is easy to see our views and bias can manifest into everyday microaggressions that shape the environment we lived in. Let me give you some examples of these microaggressions. A group of white workers commented on how Asians are so cliquish, while they forget to notice that they often meet as a group of white too. Black man in an Italian suit with 3 security clearance badges walking behind some white women underground inside a national security agency, noticing these women clutching their purses tighter. Ordinary black shoppers will often get followed by clerks in the store but not offering any help. You Orientals are so exotic. A person with dark hair and facial hair will often get called out of line at airport checkpoint. White women often ask to touch a black woman's hair. Black men often get stopped and patted down by police without any reason. I am not racist. My best friend is black. People are just people. We should be just colorblind. When I first came to this country, I would have white people speak slowly and loudly using simple sentences to me. A woman sitting next to me on the plane said, "I love you Orientals, especially your eyes," while she pulls up both sides of her eyelid. A white man in tapestry called me China doll. All these seemingly small occurrences add up to what we call cumulative impact. It is like being pecked to death by a pack of dogs. There is an emotional and physical toll on the group of people for no other reason except they're different from the whites. Almost every black mother will have the talk with her black sons when they get ready to leave their house. They reminded their son how to dress and walk, and they taught their sons how to talk to the police. Most importantly, they taught their sons not to run. They fear that today will be the last day they will see their sons alive. Generations after generations of people never had a chance to relax their shoulders in this supposedly multiracial, multicultural society. When we carry microaggressions and unconscious bias, and sometimes even blatant bias, into any institutions, now we have created systemic racism. One night, my neighbor, after having several shots of gin, decided to call me and wanted to talk to me about China. Through her slurred speech, she asked, "I read that Chinese government has been trying to spy on the US and steal our technology. Since you're Chinese, how do you feel about this?" Then she added, "My ancestors was Danish, who never was an enemy to the US, so I wouldn't have to worry about them." This is not just a curiosity question. You see, the real question behind her curiosity was, are you loyal to the US or China? She was not the first white person asking me this question. This dragged out the entire history of how Asian Americans have been treated in the United States. Since 1800, when Asian immigrants started to arrive in this country, she had never been fully accepted into this society, no matter how many generations of Asians have been born and raised in this country. They are always seen as foreigners. This is also the reason that the question, "Where are you from?" is particularly sensitive to us Asians. From Chinese Exclusion Act, Japanese American internment camp, to McCarthy's anti-communist witch hunt and inquisition, we Asians have been treated not only as foreigners but also enemies. This question of loyalty cuts like a knife. From the import of better and more efficient Japanese cars to globalization, where China had become the biggest supplier to American industries, Americans blame these Asian countries for stealing their factory jobs. No one bothers to recognize it is capitalism that allows business to freely move around the globe chasing cheap labor that costs American manufacturing jobs. Since my neighbor asked that question, COVID-19 had become a pandemic in the US. Daily reports of harassment and violence against Chinese or any Asian Americans had increased dramatically. Working on the front line, many of these Asian Americans doctors were told to go back to where they come from, or the nurses got spit on. This anti-Asian sentiment is just skin deep and ready to flare up any moment. Calling of a Chinese or Wuhan virus just added fuel to the fire. This reminded me that as Asian American, our belonging to this country is always conditional. I share these stories just to remind us that race issue in the United States is bigger than just black and white. Asians are people of color too. Of course, we Asian Americans have a special struggle between privilege and oppression. While often we are called the mono minority, many of us enjoy our opportunity to get ahead in the society and gain material success just like the whites. But we're often used by whites as a shield to deal with racial injustice. They would say, look, Asians made it in this country. They do not seem to have any problems. So why can't you black and brown people do the same? Some of us Asians learn to hide behind this label and keep silent because we think we can pass in a white society. We thought at least we wouldn't be dragged out of our cars and get beaten to death by the police. But COVID-19 has opened the scab and exposed the ugly old wounds. We do not get a pass at all. Last time I gave a little talk in this congregation, a white woman criticized me for using the term white women as a stereotype. All I did was naming the social identity. She said she preferred I use women. Like Asians, white women have a similar struggle between privilege and oppression. It is easy to have an awareness of being a woman, just like the mirror test has shown. Knowing that our society has not reached the gender equality that waves of women liberation movement have fought for. But that doesn't give white women the easy pass to hide behind their subordinated group membership as a woman and refuse to own their dominant group identity and responsibility as a white. Sometimes during a racial discussion, many white women would claim that they already knew what it's like to be oppressed. But after years of work, we have learned that one type of oppression does not automatically translate to empathy for the other. Since at least 50% of the population are women, it is very difficult for men to not be in community with women, getting to know women, or being in relationship with women. But when it comes to race, many whites, without consciously trying, can spend their whole life without having people of color in their lives. Maybe I should not be so surprised that many whites still act as if they just found out about people of color's experience for the first time. But once you are awake, your excuse, I grew up in all white neighborhoods, will not help you. You must get yourself educated. Just because you work with people of color, ride the public transportation with them, use their services, or even attend the same church, that doesn't mean you know them. It is up to white people to take initiative to form the relationship with people of color. To call your best friend, your black friend, your best friend, you must pass the friendship test. Have you sat down and had a serious conversation about race with them? When you do, would you be willing to go beyond trying to protect your intention and your innocence? During one of my Race Matter workshop, a white man said to a black man, "Can we forget about this race thing and just get to know each other?" The black man said, "Being black is part of me." So I wonder what the white man is not willing to look at. To see a black man as black, he will have to see himself as white. So sometimes it is not lack of knowledge but self-denial that stop us from truly being informed. Race is a social construct invented by early white Europeans and Christian churches to discriminate against the Indians and the Africans by seeing them as biologically inferior and less than human. Unless we root out this deep-seated bias and belief, no amount of laws can make us a just society. Many progressive and liberal whites, including some of us in this congregation, might be very justice minded, but by sitting on the sideline, you will not become white allies. Working toward racial justice requires the dominant group members, the whites, to do their work and step into discomfort. When facing the huge challenge of systemic change, whites often wring their hands, feel overwhelmed, and didn't know where to start to help. I always advise them in my workshop to start from where they are. But it takes consciousness, courage, and conviction to keep the practice going. If you are willing, I offer you 3 steps to become allies in the fight for racial justice. First, we need to know how to track. That means to wake up and notice what's going on. Pay attention to patterns of racial differences and bias, and also pay attention to your own reaction and unconscious bias. If you don't see or notice, there's nothing you can do to fix the problem. Secondly, we need to increase our empathy by active listening. Having noticed the differences, whites, the dominant group members, must be willing to be vulnerable, reach out to people of color, and seek to understand deeper what these racial differences are. This is not the time for you to talk, but to listen. You must be willing to avoid traps such as PLE, perfectly logical explanation, or say yeah but, or say I didn't see it, or defend your intention, or find similarity too quickly, or try to problem solve or give advice. When you fall into these traps, you basically hijack the dialogue and manage to shut down your friend. They will walk away believing that you do not really care. Thirdly, once you have tracked and patterns and gained a deeper understanding of racial differences and increase your empathy, it is time for you to act. You get to use intervention in situations that you sense having some racial bias. Remember, the biggest slogan in Black Lives Matters now is silence kills. If you see or hear something and do not say or do something for fear of stepping into your own discomfort, you just become part of the problem. Of course, you do not have to call someone a racist pig. There's a lot of steps you can take from naming what you saw, just the data, without judgment, to pointing out the impact of the other's behavior, to suggesting a more positive action, and all the way to direct confrontation. Not too long ago, during a conversation with 2 white women friends, I related witnessing a white man customer screaming at a Korean woman dry cleaner. The way I saw it, there were at least 3 levels of power differences in that moment. He's being a white and a man and a customer, putting him in a top dog position. Imagine how the Korean woman felt. I tried to intervene unsuccessfully. First, friends immediately said, maybe this man just had a bad day. It had nothing to do with his gender or his race. I felt shut down. Later, I told her how her statement has impacted me. While she might be right, there is a perfectly logical explanation, the PLE. But I thought she could have done is to engage me more and sought to understand more how I felt as an Asian woman. I also confronted the other friend by asking her why she kept silence during the exchange. She admitted she saw me how I was shut down, but thought I was strong enough to take care of myself, that he didn't have to come in. I told her that her coming in was not about rescuing me, but by doing her own work and standing up for what she believes. Leela Watson, an Australian Indigenous activist, academic, and artist, was once quoted, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with me, then let us work together." Isn't this one of our UU principles? Just because we believe that we're all parts of one human race, we cannot skip the hard work to acknowledge our own blind spots, shortcomings, recognize our unearned privilege, and use our deepest empathy to help heal our brothers and sisters. There is no spiritual bypass here. Once again, I like to remind all of us to work for racial justice is about us raising our own humanity and morality. By doing so, there's a chance that we human species might survive. Feeling guilty or depressed for the state of our society will be a waste of our time, emotion, and our energy. The question is if we have enough willingness to stay awake, to be conscious, courageous, and committed to take our first step. Every morning, when you brush your teeth in front of the mirror, ask yourself this question: have I done anything yesterday to help move us towards racial harmony? These are all baby steps. If your answer is yes, then there's hope for all of us to get to the promised land like Dr. King's dream. Thank you, and so be it.